All right, next up, we have wide receiver tiers. Now, wide receivers, go ask running backs how jealous they are of all the contracts wide receivers are getting and getting paid. But wide receivers are next up on our list of tiers that we are going to be reviewing. And wide receivers are a hot commodity because they're taking over the fantasy world. I mean, you could argue taking a wide receiver at number 1 and number 2 overall in your fantasy drafts, and people won't call you crazy. Like, that's just like the world that we live in now with fantasy receivers. I've already mentioned a couple times in this show, the top 8 fantasy receivers going into last season, 7 of the 8 finished in the top 8. So you're guaranteed to get production from these receivers when you draft them each and every single time, as opposed to running backs who are a 50-50 shot that they finish in the top 10 of their rankings that they were projected to be in. So let's dive in to the fantasy wide receiver tiers. And is it crazy for me to just put one player at tier 1, and that's Jefferson? Like, he deserves to just be one by himself. He is the
It's not crazy. You could debate it, but it's not crazy.
Based off of the fact that he's had the best season in his first 3 seasons of any wide receiver in history, it's just, he is absolutely just the go-to in your fantasy draft. If you took him number 1 overall, people wouldn't call you crazy. And I feel like for that simple standpoint, he deserves to be in a tier of his own. Tier 1, the elite of the elite, Jefferson is probably the only player you have there. And then I think you break it out into tier 2s here in a second, but I'll let you guys decide that. Am I crazy?
Again, it's not crazy to say that by any stretch of the imagination. Does that make it accurate? I wouldn't isolate him.
Because the only other 2 that deserve to be in that conversation are Chase, Jamar Chase, and Cooper Kupp, Cooper Kupp just got hurt, right? Jamar Chase has an issue with quarterback at the current juncture. So
I disagree with what you just said as far as there's only 2 others.
Well, and then you have what? Then you get the Hill, Tyreek Hill. Then you get
Tyreek Hill. Absolutely. Tyreek Hill finished 18 points behind Justin Jefferson just last season, and let's keep in mind he didn't have his starting quarterback for
100%.
a lot of games.
So
Tyreek Hill could easily finish at wide receiver 1, and that's me as a Chiefs fan, not a fan of him right now. He's kind of being a douche, but his upside for wide receiver 1 is certainly there,
especially PPR leagues. He catches
Jamar
the short
Chase
ones.
Is certainly in that picture. Cooper Kupp had a wildly great season 2 years ago. I probably would separate Cooper Kupp because one, I just don't know what that team is going to look like. I don't know if I trust the quarterback to stay healthy. So there's a lot of red flags. Well, and there's red flags with Tyreek Hill too, obviously with Tua, but there's guys that, like, if you get their quarterback to be healthy, are certainly in the same tier as Justin Jefferson. Now, we saw Kirk Cousins on quarterback. He's a tough dude. He will play through stuff. He will work through things. He cares a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that about him. So, yeah, obviously if I'm taking who's wide receiver 1, it's Justin Jefferson.
Yeah. I mean,
because
no question.
You know you're going to get a phenomenal season out of him. But I don't know. I don't hate your idea of him being a tier 1 by himself, but I don't agree.
Yeah, I think there's questions with everyone else behind him. I guess that kind of separates him a little bit more too, right? Chase, like I said, Hill, potentially quarterback issues if Tua goes down. Kupp, injury, hamstring going into the season. That's not great, especially. I mean, I'm buying low. With Kupp, you're trying to figure out whether or not he's going to drop with all the issues that he's having, and then everyone being down on the stock of the Rams. Oh, the Rams are not going to be good. They were terrible last season. They're not going to be good this season. Kupp's injured. You get some value for Kupp, and he's going to end up being one of the best players from a wide receiver standpoint, at least the top 10 this season. So I feel like stock on him, even though he's maybe not on a lot of people's radar, given how good he is and given how much he could produce, I think still keeps him up there. Jamar Chase, I mean, there's a lot of weapons in Cincinnati, but I think he's proven that he's been pretty consistent. Who's throwing the football in the first part of the season? We'll see. That's the issue there, but he's going to produce once Burrow gets back. Then you get into the Devontae Adams and the Diggses of the world. So Devontae Adams, new quarterback. He's getting a little older, but he's still 9 touchdown passes over 25 yards. So he gets those long balls, and I think that that's what's going to be helping him in that situation. But still, the Raiders have a low win total. I don't know how much they're going to be competitive in a lot of games. Maybe that helps them in throwing the ball a little bit more late in games. So maybe that's what keeps me kind of in this bottom end of the tier 2, top of tier 3. Then you got Diggs, who 4th best wide receiver last year. He's got some controversy issues of whether or not he's happy. So that's kind of weird, but you still doesn't change the fact that the Buffalo Bills are going to be good offensively. I mean, those are kind of your top guys, getting to the bottom end of tier 2, in my opinion.
I think Amon-Ra is going to have a big year. Did you mention him?
Amon-Ra, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown are kind of in the same grouping.
I love Amon-Ra. I love CeeDee Lamb. Diggs, I'm a little nervous about just because the whole controversy of whatever's going on. And then I love Garrett Wilson. I love Garrett Wilson.
Garrett Wilson's in the sexy group.
Of everyone, I'm rarely wrong on this stream, Chris. I've maybe been the most wrong about Garrett Wilson. I was not high on Garrett Wilson going to the draft 2 years ago. I was like, I don't see it. I don't know. Garrett Wilson's a dude. Now you have Aaron Rodgers, who, guess what Aaron Rodgers likes to do? He likes to find his dude, and he features dude.
There's some highlights in camp.
Adams, dude, Garrett Wilson's so good, and he is like a Devontae Adams clone, Chris.
And Scotty, I've been quiet this whole time. Can I chime in for a second here?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Like, you were talking about, what'd you say, Jefferson number 1, maybe Chase number 2 in your overall draft, right? Did I
just from a tier standpoint, just like we're just kind of breaking down like the tiers and where players fall. Correct.
But literally, if they went 1-2 in a draft, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't be shocked.
No, not
and
at all.
You gave these defensive coordinators all off season to prepare for this.
They prepare every offseason. The last 3 off seasons they've had to prepare for Jefferson.
I think that's what defensive coordinators do, is they prepare in the offseason.
And
we'll look at Jefferson's stats. Week 1 against Green Bay, 10 receptions, 184. Week 16, 1 reception for 15 yards. Like, these teams are shutting them down. Chicago Bears, the last week of the year, 4 receptions for 30 yards.
Okay.
Week 5,
you're cherry picking.
154. All these teams are going to start pressing man-to-man, putting their best corners on these guys.
They were doing that the last 2 years.
No, they weren't.
What do you mean? People didn't know that Justin Jefferson was good coming into last year?
No, they were not.
Let's just put this in perspective. Oh. He's the number 1 receiver in most statistical categories. 7 different. Wait.
Justin Jefferson going into last year. No, Justin Jefferson. First of all, he's going in his 3rd year. Justin Jefferson going into last year.
His 3rd year. Last year was his 2nd year.
He was drafted.
They didn't go man to man against him.
Okay. If you go man to man against Justin Jefferson, you're fucked.
Look at the stats. You're completely incorrect.
You literally picked weeks that he didn't play well. I could go to week 14, 15, and 16 where he put up 27.8, 24.3, and 25.3 as a wide receiver.
The Giants, the Colts, and the Lions.
Yeah.
Who do they have as defensive corner? You don't think those defensive coordinators are going to adjust to this?
Well, Justin Jefferson in drafts last year in fantasy was the number 2 wide receiver taken on average. So either defensive coordinators, the dumbest people on the planet, and fantasy drafters know better, or they were planning this last year. It's not our fault that he blew up against your Green Bay Packers in week 1 because they missed the memo.
Oh, no, not week 1.
So
it was week 1.
Milwaukee's. There's 7.
It was week 1.
We have 7.
It was absolutely week 1.
7 different games with 30 plus PPR points. Which is crazy. In 3 seasons.
And my stats were with half point PPR. I'm not even talking full point.
In his first 3 seasons, he's had the most catches and receiving yards through the first 3 seasons ever of any player. And he's 600 plus yards ahead of the next guy in NFL history. Like, he is good. You know what I'm saying?
He's very, 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 very good. I'm just arguing with you. If you want these guys to be drafted 1 or 2 overall, you don't understand it. You don't think defenses are going to adapt and overcome to this?
There's zero chance defenses haven't already tried to do this. There's only so much you can do. No, they didn't have 1 year. They've had at least with Justin Jefferson 2 years. At least
you can take away the rookie year saying, oh, he might not have been like a guy that we he's got
they weren't featured, but after his rookie year he went off. In his rookie year, the next 2 years, of course they knew that was the best wide receiver on Minnesota. And that's, if you're gonna take a guy away, we're gonna take away Justin Jefferson. And guess what they didn't do? They didn't take away Justin Jefferson.
Zone defense against them, which was stupid.
But a lot of teams don't change week to week what they do best. They play man if that's what they do as their coverage, or they play zone if that's what their best thing is. They're not going to adjust week to week and play like a ton of man 1 week when that's not their personality. Teams are cocky. They're going to fit with what they do. If that doesn't fit that week, they still want to improve on what they do best. And if that's zone, that's zone. Justin Jefferson will beat man or zone, though, by the way.
Milwaukee's, if you had a top 2 pick in a fantasy league where you put in a couple $100, pretty substantial buy-in. Would you consider Justin Jefferson in your 1 or 2 top overall picks if you had the top 2 picks? Would you consider him?
No.
Oh. I would love to be. I would love to be in that league.
He had in half point PPR last year. He had 304 points. Which was almost 100 more when you look at like wide receiver 8. That was 214. It was 90 points more than wide receiver 8 last year in fantasy. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I like a lot. But 304, he separated himself by 20 points to number 2, which is Devontae Adams, who's probably going to drop without Derek Carr this year. The only one that might be able to touch him this year, quite frankly, is Tyreek Hill. If Tua stays healthy and Tyreek blows up like he was doing, like, that's the one guy. But like, hey, Tyreek finished number 3 overall in fantasy last year with backup quarterback a lot of the time. Now that teams know that Tyreek's good, are they going to try and take him away? Or did they already know he was good and it doesn't matter?
If he gets to play, unless he gets charged with.
Oh, he's going to play.
Now you take away all the. You're talking strictly about like defensive plans against good players. Like, good players find ways to get production. Like,
which is why they make $30 million.
Defense.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. If the solution to covering elite wide receivers was simply playing man, everyone would do it. That's not the solution. There isn't a solution.
That's what they started doing at the end of the year.
The end of the year, I just rattled off 3 of his best 6 weeks of the year were week 14, 15, and 16.
Second half of the season, I'm looking right at it. He had 3 touchdowns.
If I literally totaled up his half point PPR fantasy points from the first half to the second half, I bet his second half might have been more.
Cuban.
He had 3 good games against the Giants, the Colts, and the Lions. Other than that,
Cuban makes a good point. Breaking news: Packers fan doesn't like Justin Jefferson.
No, I don't. You're right about that, Cuban. Yeah. And Jair's gonna shut his ass down.
Oh, I would love to see.
We're gonna lose.
His highest point total of the season last year was in week 1 against your Green Bay Packers. And I understand that wasn't exclusively against Jair. Jair's a really good corner, obviously. He's a top certainly top 5. You could even go higher than that. Corner in the league.
And Jair already said he's going around the field going, I'm marking up against their number ones. I don't care who it is.
And guess what? Against Justin Jefferson, if it's single coverage against Jair, and I love Jair, I just said he's a top 5 corner in the league. Justin Jefferson will cook him.
Last year when they matched up 1-1, he had 1 reception on 5 targets for 15 yards.
You're just gonna avoid the other game. Got it.
Hey, Milwaukee, I love the debate though. I love it. But it's just
no. I the only debate was you're telling people to draft wide receivers 1 and 2.
Yes.
That's the league we live in with the fantasy, like the landscape. I mean, if you're gonna look at what play, we said it, top 8 players, wide receiver wise, finished in the top 8.
Analytics, all right.
No, but that's what
you guys are analytics.
Chris, I'm on a random. I was like, I'll go to one random rankings, full rankings across the board with any position. They have, and I just went to one site. They have Justin Jefferson ranked number 1 overall in fantasy. They have McCaffrey 2, and they have Jamar Chase 3. So yes, if we say Jefferson and Chase go 1-2, and I'm like, that's not wild. Yeah, I went to one site, and they literally had him at 1 and 3.
Until
overall.
Burrow blows out his Achilles, and
you could say that about anybody. You could say that about anybody until this guy it gets hurt, and then that player itself gets hurt. Like maybe he does, maybe he doesn't.
With Devil Doc, week 4, 10 for 147. Week 5, 12 for 154. Week 6, 6 for 107. Week 8, 6 for 98. Week 8, 6 for 98. Week 9, 7 for 115. Week 10, 10 for 193. If you're getting that production, would you take him number 1 overall? Given that's the kind of stats you're looking at most of the time over the course of a season. Still, that's still a monster production.
He led the league in receiving yards last year.
All those weeks
and he was number 4 overall the year before. Or no, I'm sorry, he was number 3. So in 2021, he was number 3 in receiving yards. Actually, no. Well, I'm wrong again. He was number 2. He was only behind Cooper Kupp. I keep looking at this wrong. So he was number 2 overall 2 years ago in receiving yards.
The guy is a great player.
Mm-hmm.
Great player. Don't get me wrong.
But
I don't know about number 1 overall.
So
who'd you take 1 overall? Who'd you take? Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry?
A defense? Like a defense? Kicker, maybe?
Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, okay. All right.
Moving on to the next
let's
tier.
get on to the tiers here. Thanks, Milwaukee's. Appreciate that coming in, man. Good debate, obviously. And I could see, maybe you double, just thinking oh man, maybe I should think about this a little bit more. Don't overthink it. So yeah, we got into the Hills. The Devontae Adams, the Diggs. Let's get into so we had the tier 3s, which I think can borderline be tier 2s. AJ Brown, CD Lamb, Amar-Ra St. Brown. I think these are the value picks that people may, let slip down to the bottom end of your first round, into the second round, middle second round, depending on how many teams you have drafting in your league. But these guys are value picks from that level, at that high of the draft. I feel like you should take a really, really good look at. What's up, G Girl? By the way, welcome in, G Girl.
What's up, G Girl?
Shout out to G Girl. Also, Boofus. Besides the top tier receivers, I'm excited to see what Jaguars and Bears wide receivers, watching them be interesting. I think there's some interesting ones, but I think going into some of the other receiver rankings, you're getting into kind of like after the AJ Brown, CD Lambs, Amar-Ra St. Browns. I think you should target those guys. Absolutely, I think there's a lot of value there. But then you get into kind of like these 3 tiers below. You get the young and sexies in tier 4. The tier 5s are the boring vets that are kind of getting older. And then you get the tier 6 that are like just island of bad quarterbacks, right? So let's start like the tier 4s, the young and sexies. These are kind of like the Chris Olaves, the Garrett Wilsons, the Jalen Waddles, which, by the way, you love Garrett Wilson. And I think there's a couple guys in here that you should.
Olave should be in a higher tier. Garrett Wilson should be in a higher tier. Those two for sure. Those are wide receiver ones on teams that'll throw the ball a decent amount.
Correct. Then you got the T Higgins, the DK Metcalfs, those kind of guys that I think kind of fall within this category of like.
And I'm less confident in those guys because, quite frankly, DK Metcalf's like what everyone loves in Seattle, but most years, for whatever reason, Tyler Lockett outperforms him in fantasy. So like. And not to mention, you add the number one wide receiver in the draft this year in Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't love DK Metcalf this year in fantasy at all because I think they're going to spread the ball around quite a bit. It's not that I don't love his talent, but like they got options there in Seattle. Like they have like three elite options, which is another reason why Geno finished number 5 overall last year, and then they take the top wide receiver in the draft this year in Jackson Smith and Jigba. Let's figure that out a little bit.
GG, you had AJ Brown as tier 4 last year. Waddle is not a tier 4. So here's a couple things. AJ Brown, we were kind of like AJ Brown was kind of like he transferred over to the Eagles. We had Jalen Hurts, who we thought it was kind of a make or break year for Jalen Hurts last year. Last year he was, if you remember, the year of are you the guy or are you not the guy? And we found out that he is the guy. He is that guy for the Eagles, obviously. So the fact that AJ Brown was a tier 4 last year is kind of like that speculatory. We'll wait and see what we get from Hurts, and we'll see what that change looks like with the offense. Yeah, sure. So then, obviously he takes a step up this year. He's bottom end of tier 2, top end of tier 3, in my opinion. I could see him the only thing that holds him back is so many weapons in Philadelphia that kind of give him that little bit of variance of some of the guys that don't have as many weapons at the top, where you can just load up on some of these other guys, right? However, I do think that AJ has definitely stepped up this year when it comes to where we have him tiered out at. When it comes to Waddle, I think same kind of situation for Waddle is the issue of quarterback and who's going to be throwing the ball throughout the course of the season. You have to worry about the concussion issues for Tua. Same thing with Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill can kind of thrive under any quarterback, but how does that affect Waddle? I know Waddle's good, but like there are still a lot of mouths to feed in Miami on top of that. So you have to come to that conclusion as well of, all right, well, are you gambling on the fact that Waddle, young and sexy, he's a sexy name. Are you going to rely on that over the course of your NFL fantasy season to produce for you week in and week out, given the circumstances of that Miami offense? And if everything stays according to plan, and if Tua stays concussion free, and everyone stays he could be a top end tier 3 player. He could finish as a top 10 wide receiver in this league potentially next season. But am I banking on that with all of the variables that go in? That's what drops him a little bit lower to tier 4. I don't know. That's a good division. Obviously, there's good players. That's where I kind of pump the brakes a little bit more on Waddle. Do I like him? Sure. Am I going to draft him if I get value for him? Sure. So that's just where I stand on like Waddle with the variables that go in with Miami, right?
As I'm catching up here, G-Girl Waddle is not a 4. You had AJ Brown as tier 4 last year. So here's something controversial probably with the wide receivers that maybe people disagree with. Chris, who was higher 2 years ago before AJ Brown was traded off to the Titans? Who was higher on AJ Brown than me?
You were you were AJ Brown's number 1 fan club.
Let me fix this. That's a problem.
The hair was just a mess, man.
That was like, oh no.
Oh no. Get your life together. Get your life together.
I apologize to everyone.
At this point, you shouldn't listen to anything I say moving forward. I can't even put a hat on at this point. Wow. I was talking about talking about AJ Brown. I was higher on AJ Brown a couple years ago than anyone else in the world, probably, Chris. Right?
Correct.
As a talent.
Number one in the fan club.
Number one fan club, and I still am. I think AJ Brown's a crazy talented. I think Devontae Smith is obviously wildly talented. Won a fucking Heisman. You have Dallas Goedert. You have Jalen Hurts. There's everything to love about this Philadelphia offense, and this Philadelphia offense is going to be really good this year. But like, I think they're getting overdrafted.
You're buying the stock high.
I think. Listen, you have a quarterback in Jalen Hurts that is going to run the ball a lot, right? So like that's going to eat up into the passing yards for some of these wide receivers.
There's a lot of options there.
You have a ton of options with Devontae and Dallas Goedert, who are going to get a lot of looks as well. Like it's hard for me to make a case for like AJ Brown. Like AJ Brown may not end up wide receiver 1 this year in Philly. And that's not to say like, I love AJ Brown's talent, and that offense is going to be filthy and really good. But as a fantasy perspective, I think they're getting a little overdrafted because there's a lot of options there. And again, you have that running quarterback. Jalen Hurts isn't going to finish, top. I don't know where to draw the line. Probably 8 in passing yards this year in the league. But you have 2 wide receivers in Philadelphia going extremely high, and you have a tight end going extremely high. So something doesn't add up there, fantasy-wise. And that doesn't mean I don't love all those players because they're all really good. But for fantasy, I'd shy away from, based off of where they're getting drafted at least, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas, frankly.
I mean, a lot of people, I think, in drafts are reaching on some of these players, which I think, like, you have to keep in mind, don't get too hyped. That's why they're in this young, sexy category of players where it's like you're going to get mesmerized by the name and be like, oh, I need to figure out a way to get them earlier than they probably should be drafted in your fantasy football draft. Let's just put it in that perspective, right? Don't get mesmerized by that. Like, just think about this from like a strictly, that's why we're going to get next into the boring vets that are productive, the Amari Coopers, the Calvin Ridleys, who there's like a little upside. That's
the Keenan Allens, the Keenan Allens, the Deebo Samuels, the Tyler Lockett's. All of these guys are going to be in this next tier that you're not going to want to like. You can get value at Tyler Lockett. You can get some value with Amari Cooper with a good Browns offense that might be a little bit better with a full season. You might get, Deebo Samuel is going to get his. He's running back, he's receiver, he's everything. He's a Swiss Army knife. So it's like San Francisco uses him quite a bit. Like, there's guys that come after this that you might be seeing other teams reach on, like a Waddle or some of these other guys, or like a AJ Brown, where it's like you can get some really good value at some of these boring vets. Like, go home to your wife. Don't go out to the bars and like find the hot girl at the bar. Go home to your wife. There's everyone knows that girl's hot. Don't chase after it. They're gonna reach too high. There's gonna be too much competition for it. Go for the perfectly, a little age, maybe not perfect. This is actually sexist.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's getting really back and saying you two are both married.
I know. It is what it is.
I tried. It didn't work.
Anyways.
Football.
Yeah, and then. And I mean, I think there's a really good value with some of those names that are coming up here in this next like grouping, but like after this group,
I'll drink to that.
I'll drink to that.
Oh God!
It didn't go great.
Yeah, I mean,
My man.
Yeah, it's not great.
I blame Chris for that. He led into that.
Sorry, I did. It's not me. But next, but after this group here, after the boring vets, you get into the island of bad quarterbacks. These are like the guys that you love that I feel like always that have questions. We're getting into the Drake Londons, the Terry McLaurins, the Chris Godwins, the Hopkins, DeAndre Hopkins, the DJ Moores.
What?
Deontay Johnson. I think, obviously I think he has a little more upside in this group. Marquise Brown, Christian Watson, Jerry Jeudy.
Don't baby Deontay Johnson.
But these next group are like talented wide receivers that don't have good quarterback situations that you're kind of like not super excited about. So again, London, McLaurin, Chris Godwin, DeAndre Hopkins, DJ Moore,
My favorite of that group are probably London and first off McLaurin. Terry McLaurin to me is a top 10 talent at wide receiver in this league.
Yeah,
he's very good.
He's so good.
Now,
obviously, we'll see who is it? Sam Howell.
Sam Howell
in Washington.
Howell or Brissett.
So that's not ideal.
But to be fair, he's put up numbers in other years where he's never played with a good quarterback in Washington. Never done it. Terry McLaurin's filthy. People sleep on Terry. Terry's a top 10 talent.
Scary Terry he's great.
No doubt.
He relies on other players to get him the ball. And so that's
Drake London going into year 2 with. They have a better thrower of the ball, and Ritter's a better thrower. Than Mariota, instantly. By the way, if you guys watch Quarterback, if you haven't watched Quarterback, the Netflix series that we've talked about a little bit that features Mahomes and Kirk, Cousins, and Mariota. Anytime Mariota show, just go ahead and fast forward. Let me save you some time. He's boring. He's so boring.
I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard from a few people that he barely gets any screen time anyways.
He doesn't get a ton of screen time. Obviously, Mahomes gets the most, especially in the last 2 episodes. It's almost all Mahomes because it's the playoff run. But Mariota's just adds nothing to that.
Yeah, I fast forward through some of his sections, but it's not super engaging for sure.
And I'm an Oregon fan, so I like Mariota as a player and whatever, but he was just boring in that series. Anyway, going back to this. DJ Moore, it's not that I question DJ Moore's talent, but Justin Fields hasn't proven to have a substantial wide receiver in fantasy thus far through 2 years. DJ Moore is probably the most talented guy, but he hasn't been close to having a good wide receiver. Calvin Ridley's been the talk of camp that he's the greatest thing to ever exist in Jacksonville.
I think his stock is too high right now.
All that means is he's going to get overdrafted.
Yeah,
especially
people
with
are going to listen to that and get overdrafted.
Especially with the year and a half off, he's not going to be good right off the bat.
I will say to defend Rex. I don't defend Rex guys a lot, but Deontay Johnson last year was sixth.
So many targets.
6th in targets last year with 147. Just no touch. They just couldn't score. They had an awful offense that just couldn't score. 14 end zone targets and 0 TDs. That's 6th overall in the NFL with all the targets and no touchdowns. He gets all of these targets and nothing to come out of it, which is why I feel like Deontay Johnson is
he's wide receiver 30. That's a steal, Chris.
It's a steal. If you're getting him with a quarterback that's you're not so sure.
All you see is Pickens highlights in Pittsburgh camp, right? That's all they're gonna throw out there.
Especially with how.
But you know what Deontay Johnson can do that Pickens can't?
Run routes.
Separate from the quarterback.
That too.
Pickens is all just amazing catches, but he you can't throw to a guy that's covered all the time. Deontay Johnson is going to be open way more often for Pittsburgh and Kenny Pickett than George Pickens is. So while Pickens is the sexy highlight reel, Deontay Johnson is absolutely slept on in fantasy football this year.
I think you should keep an eye on Deontay Johnson 100%. Given the fact that he was targeted so much, given the fact that he could be that safety blanket for Pickens, I just think there's a lot of value to get with him in this Steelers offense.
Him and Lockett are my favorite sleepers.
Yeah.
But also too
sleepers.
How about Matt Canada loves his jet sweeps, so Johnson could have some impact in the run game too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of upside, I think.
Yeah.
Also on this list, Christian Watson, which is in an interesting situation with Jordan Love. You don't love that. Speaking of questionable quarterbacks,
I don't hate it.
I think he's going to be interesting. I think he'll get targeted a lot. I just don't know what that's going to pan out to.
Yeah.
So if you're in a PPR league, maybe it pans out to a little bit more production. But if you're in just a standard scoring league, maybe it's I don't know how many touchdowns you're going to get out of Christian Watson or long yardage plays. Maybe you get a few here and there, but Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to learn about Love in that situation in Green Bay.
Yeah, I'd say like there's another tier that Watson would fall under, like the guys you don't really like, but at the same time they're going to be the number one receiver on the team, so they're going to get targets. So might as well give them a flyer.
Yeah.
So you got guys like Watson, like Juju, like Hollywood.
Yeah,
Hollywood Brown.
Hollywood Brown.
Like, someone in Tampa, Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, someone in there has got to catch a ball, right?
Yeah, it's like that kind of tier.
Those are elite guys that like no one wants to touch Godwin or Mike Evans this year.
It's like someone's got to catch the ball again, like Hollywood Brown. I don't like him, but who else is going to catch the ball in Arizona? Especially when they don't like the tight ends.
Arizona is just a stay away from me altogether, knowing they're never going to put up points. They've projected as the lowest scoring team according to Vegas across the board. So it's like if they're not going to score touchdowns, you got to get yards. Are you going to get yards from a guy like Kyler Murray, who's going to be potentially running the ball and taking away targets from your wide receivers, potentially not being able to complete those passes? They look awful. They're going to be awful this year, losing games. Like, I just don't see any value in drafting any any players in Arizona. It's just terrifying for me.
Yeah. I mean, I get that, but at some point it might be so good of a deal that you got to pull the trigger.
Yeah. It's like old boy in New Orleans. No. Dude that hasn't played in 2 years.
Michael Thomas.
How late does he go to where you're like, okay,
he doesn't get drafted.
Okay.
He doesn't get drafted.
Maybe it's worth taking a flyer on this guy. You know what I'm saying? And then now we're getting into injuries. Like, obviously you got guys that get injury prone, kind of like, you got a Kadarius Toney who's going to get very good value if he's healthy. No one's going to draft him really very high, obviously not rightfully so. But at the same time, when he does get healthy, he's one of the most dynamic players from a wide receiver standpoint that are in an offense like that. So you got the Kadarius Toneys, you got the
Chris,
Mike
how
Williams.
Wild is it? Let me throw a stat with that real quick. The QB1 last year and going into this year is probably Mahomes for fantasy.
Correct.
Yeah. You don't right now have a top 40 wide receiver for the fantasy on the Chiefs roster.
Yeah.
But you have the number one quarterback. I understand you have the number one tight end in Kelsey. I get that.
That just shows you how good Mahomes is, though.
Someone's going to have to jump out on that roster.
Yeah.
Tony.
Someone's going to have to get those yards. They're going to get the yards. So who's going to get Tony, whether it's Tony or Sky Moore or
MVS is off the team, right? He's gone, right?
Who?
Marcus Valdes-Scantling. He's off.
No, he's on the team.
Okay.
Yeah. MVS there's been a lot of highlights coming out of the Chiefs Twitter account on Justin Ross.
That UDFA that's supposed to be really good but can't stay healthy.
Correct. And he was basically undrafted last year. Basically was on our injury reserve last year. Done a lot of good things in camp. We'll see. I have no idea. Ironically, in Chiefs Twitter now, it's like, oh, we have too many options at wide receiver. Who are we going to keep? But none of them are proven. So it's like, one of these players that if you draft a KC guy and you get the right guy with where you're drafting him is going to blow up. It's going to blow up for you. You're going to have a great year because of that.
Buying a lottery ticket is what it is.
But it's who is it going to be?
It's buying a lottery ticket.
Moore? Is it going to be Rashee Rice, who they drafted in the second round this year, who has had a great camp from what I've heard and seen? There's so many guys there that could be the number one option at wide receiver behind Travis Kelce. But you just don't I think it would have clearly been Kadarius Toney, but now his injury stuff obviously prevents that. So
yeah, it's just a crapshoot with the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's just you may be picking up the best player fantasy wise for the Kansas City Chiefs off the waiver wire after your draft.
I might spend my draft. I'll take 2 wide receivers that aren't Chiefs. And then my next 4 wide receivers will just all be the top 4 wide receiver in the Chiefs because I know I know one of them is going to hit big.
And then,
I know one of them is going to hit.
Yeah.
And then I got 3 great wide receivers.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Just saying. It's a strategy.
So there you go. I mean, after that, it's kind of like, pick and choose, right? Like there's a lot of different players. I mean, we already talked about staying away from Colts players like Michael Pittman. There's guys that, San Francisco 49ers like Brandon Ayuk. I think he's interesting, but at the same time, there's so many options. So from week to week, he could show up like based off of like the offense and Shanahan. Like I love Ayuk, and he's proven out that he could be a good.
I love Ayuk. I wouldn't touch Debo with a 10-foot pole in fantasy.
Yeah, I think that there's some things you should. You mentioned
don't take Debo.
You mentioned Pickens. I think I like some other guys over Pickens.
Oh yeah, no, I don't love Pickens.
And so so there's some interesting players here, but hopefully this kind of clears up a little bit of what we think on some of these tiers. It's getting to the next segment of our show, so we want to get to that here next. But guys, we're going to be posting these to our social media platform, i.e. YouTube. So make sure you go join in. !socials in the chat gets you all the links to all of our social media platforms, especially YouTube, which where we're going to be posting all of these videos. We already have our previous fantasy videos up. So !socials, Rhett, can you throw that in the chat for us?
Yeah.
Por favor. And go check those out. Give it some love. It spreads it to a wider audience, especially if you're commenting, liking the videos. That would help tremendously. If there's one thing you do to support this channel, it's going over and joining us on YouTube and watching those videos and commenting and liking those videos. Also, hit that follow button. If you're new to the channel, you're lurking around in the background here on Twitch, that helps us out as well. Just join in the conversation. We like to get to know you guys. We're doing some fun things on Sunday Night Football, getting you guys, the fans, involved on our Sunday Night Football stream. So we need to know who you are if you're going to be a part of that. And we need to know your team and where you're from. And it's good to get to know you ahead of time. So make sure you go and hit that follow button and let us know where your team is or who your team is and where you're from. I dropped at MVS, Mecole, Sky last season, hoping one would stand out as your favorite target. Didn't work out how I hoped.
Yeah, I mean, should have drafted Juju.
Juju. So what you're saying is Scotty is wrong again, says Rick.
There's gonna be a wide receiver that hits. It's just a matter of which one. Although Mahomes is really good where he is going to spread it around, but someone's getting wildly undrafted in that wide receiver core for the Chiefs. It's just the reason they're wildly underdrafted is you don't know which one it's going to be.
It's like picking. It's like picking 10 teams to win the Super Bowl. You know only one's going to win, but you're just kind of spreading the net a little bit. You're going to lose on a lot of those. I mean, you're going to lose on literally all of them but one. But it only takes the one.
Maybe drop the rest.
It only takes the one. You'll figure that
out after 2 weeks. You'll figure out pretty quickly, and then you drop the rest and pick out some guys.
True.